The universe doesn't care if you're broke. It will still try to kill you for spare parts. That's the thought that rattled around my skull as the Kraken's main salvaging arm, the crack arm as we called it, screamed in protest. We were clamped onto the spine of a dead freighter, the St. Gabriel, in the guts of the Calyx Belt. It was a metal graveyard out here, and we were the vultures picking at the bones. "Hold her steady, Faulkner. She's bucking like a mule," Cormac Finnegan's voice crackled through the comms. His magnetic boots were clamped to the St. Gabriel's hull, a plasma cutter in his gloved hands, showering the void with silent orange sparks. "She's steady," I grunted, my hands tight on the controls. "The wreck's just unstable. How much longer, Finnegan?" "Almost got the alloy plate free. This one's gotta be worth something. Pure vanadium." On my other screen, Emmett Hayes, our engineer, had the numbers laid out. "The stress on the arm's torque motor is at 92%, Garrison. Any sudden shifts and it'll shear right off." "You hear that, Cormac? Gently," I said. "I only do gentle on Tuesdays," he shot back. A moment later, a deep groan shuddered through our hull as a massive section of the freighter's superstructure tore loose. Cormac's tether snapped with a sharp ping that echoed in my headset like a gunshot. He went spinning off into the black, a frantic silhouette against the distant star field. "Man overboard!" Willa Monroe yelled from her station. Her fingers were already a blur across her navigation panel. "I've got a suit telemetry. Emmett, can you get a drone on him?" My heart hammered against my ribs. Losing a crew member was bad enough. Losing a friend was unthinkable. But losing a $40,000 plasma cutter was something Orbital Consolidated, the corporation that held the leash on my ship, would absolutely add to my tab. We spent a harrowing 10 minutes retrieving him, his cursing a steady, reassuring beat against the backdrop of empty space. Back on board, the mood was as dead as the freighter we just risked our lives to pick clean. The vanadium plate fetched us just enough to cover fuel and a week's worth of protein paste. Cormac was nursing a bruised ego and a dislocated shoulder. Emmett was running diagnostics on the strained crack arm, and I was staring at a fresh batch of payment reminders glowing red on my personal data pad. Final notice, account delinquency, asset repossession imminent. The words swam before my eyes. The Kraken wasn't just my ship. She was my home, my albatross, the last thing my father left me besides a mountain of debt. In the midst of this gloom, only Willa seemed alive. She was hunched over her console, filtering deep space resonance, a strange little smile on her face. She was a legend chaser, always scouring dead frequencies and forgotten logs for whispers of ghost ships and impossible treasures. Most of the time, it was just solar flare echoes or pulsar radiation. "Guys," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "you need to hear this." Emmett sighed, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "Willa, if it's another recording of what you think is a space whale, I'm not interested." "It's not," she insisted, turning up the gain. A faint, ethereal sound filled the cockpit. It was a repetitive string of pulses, degraded by time and distance, almost lost in the static hiss of the cosmos. It was a distress signal, an old one. "It's an antique colonial frequency," she said, her eyes wide with excitement. "Century-old emergency band. I ran it through the historical database." She paused for dramatic effect. "The signature matches the registry for the CSS Star Wanderer." The name hung in the air. Every spacer knew the story. The Star Wanderer. The first of the great colony ships, launched with 1,000 souls on a one-way trip to Proxima Centauri. It was a symbol of humanity's future. Then, 100 years ago, it vanished, without a trace. No wreckage, no final message, just gone. The bounty placed on it by the colonial authority was the stuff of legend, enough to buy a small moon. Emmett snorted, unconvinced. 100-year-old signal fragment. It could be anything. A reflection, a data ghost. We're chasing shadows, Willa. The signal is cycling, Emmett. "It's weak, but it's active," she countered, pointing to the screen. "And I've triangulated the origin point. It's coming from inside the Serpent's Eye Nebula." A cold knot formed in my stomach. The Serpent's Eye. A navigational nightmare. A swirling mess of ionized gas and gravitational tides that could tear a ship apart. No one went there unless they had a death wish. "No," I said, flatly. "Absolutely not. We'd be lucky to get out of there with our hull intact, let alone find a ghost ship." "But the bounty, Garrison," Willa pleaded. "We'd be set for life. You could pay off the Kraken 10 times over." I was about to shut her down for good when my datapad chimed again. A new message. It wasn't a reminder this time. It was a formal notice from Orbital Consolidated. They were exercising the final clause in my loan agreement. An impound vessel had been dispatched to our last known location. They were coming to take my ship. They were coming to take everything. I looked at the desperate hope in Willa's eyes, the weary skepticism on Emmett's face, and the quiet fear in Cormac's. They were my crew, my family, and we were out of road. "Willa," I said, my voice hoarse, "plot the course." Her face lit up. Emmett just shook his head and walked back towards the engine room, muttering about updating his will. The jump was violent. The Kraken shuddered as the FTL drive kicked in, the ship groaning under the strain of a vector it was never designed for. The stars outside the viewport smeared into streaks of light, and then we were somewhere else. The Serpent's Eye Nebula wasn't black. It was a suffocatingly thick soup of incandescent gas, glowing with eerie shades of violet and venomous green. Outside, there was a profound, unnerving silence. Our sensors screamed with interference, a chaotic wall of noise. But through it all, like a whisper in a hurricane, was one clear, steady pulse. The signal. It was here, and it was waiting for us. Pushing through the nebula felt like swimming through oil. The gases were thick, clinging to our hull and playing hell with the sensors. Willa was a maestro at the helm, coaxing the Kraken through gravitational eddies that threatened to twist us into scrap. For hours, all we had was that faint, repeating signal, a siren's call leading us deeper into the glowing fog. "Getting a proximity alert," Emmett's voice announced from engineering. "Massive object, directly ahead. It's big. Real big." "On screen," I ordered. The forward view cleared for a moment as we broke through a dense wall of gas, and we saw it. My breath caught in my throat. The Star Wanderer was a monster. The old colonial schematic showed a vessel about a mile long. This thing? This thing was easily 3 times that size. Its silhouette was a jagged tear in the fabric of the nebula, a shape that felt fundamentally wrong. It didn't reflect the light from the glowing gas clouds. It seemed to drink it. Its surface was a flat, matte void. It was less a ship and more a hole in the universe. "That's not right," Willa whispered, her usual excitement replaced by a note of awe and fear. "The dimensions are all wrong." As we drew closer, the truly alien nature of the ship became terrifyingly clear. The hull wasn't made of metal plates and rivets. It was covered in vast, overlapping plates of a smooth, bone-white material that looked like polished ivory or the carapace of some colossal insect. Great curving spars arched along its length, not like structural supports, but like the ribs of a leviathan. There were no sharp angles, only unsettling organic curves. It looked less like something built and more like something grown. "I'm hailing them," I said, my voice sounding small in the sudden stillness of the bridge. "CSS Star Wanderer, this is the salvage vessel Kraken. Do you copy?" Only static answered. No lights, no engine signatures, no heat blooms. The ship was a tomb, drifting in a slow, silent rotation. It had been waiting here for 100 years. "I've got a bad feeling about this, Captain," Cormac said from behind me. He'd been quiet the whole trip, his eyes fixed on the view screen. The big ex-Marine, the guy who laughed in the face of explosive decompression, looked spooked. "This place feels off, wrong." "We didn't come all this way to turn back because of a feeling," I said, though I felt it too, a cold dread that had nothing to do with the debt or the nebula. Willa scanned the colossal hull. "There, I see a docking port, aft section, dorsal side. It's the only one that doesn't look sealed." She expertly maneuvered the Kraken closer. The docking port was unlike any I'd ever seen. Instead of a standard metallic Arius airlock, it was a circular aperture of the same bone-like material, puckered inward. It looked disturbingly like a sphincter. Our docking clamps struggled to find a purchase on the slick, curved surface. Finally, with a jolt, they locked on. "Docking seal is, unstable, but holding," Emmett reported, his voice tight with skepticism. "I'm extending the tunnel." Our corridor connected with a soft thud. There was no hiss of atmosphere equalization. "Try to cycle the outer door," I ordered. The mechanism whined in protest. Then, instead of retracting, the bone-like iris dilated slowly, opening with a wet, tearing sound, like cartilage being pulled apart. Emmett's voice was strained. "The atmosphere analysis is in. It's, breathable, high oxygen, nitrogen, trace elements, but there's something else. Hints of ammonia and, I don't know, something else. The sensors are flagging it as an unknown organic compound." "What does it smell like?" I asked. A pause. "The readouts don't say, but the pressure is stable. We can go in without helmets." I grabbed my pulse rifle. Cormac racked a shell into his shotgun. "Safety first," he grunted.
Cormac and I went first, stepping out of our familiar metal airlock and into the alien vessel. The floor wasn't a steel deck. It was a firm but yielding surface, porous and slightly damp under my boots, like walking on hard-packed cartilage. The corridor beyond wasn't a straight line of bolted plates. It was a curving, organic tunnel. The walls were the inside of a rib cage, arching overhead and glowing with a soft internal phosphorescence. The light was milky and pale, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe at the edge of my vision. The air was cold and heavy. It didn't smell like ozone or ammonia as the sensors suggested. It smelled sweet and rotten, the cloying scent of ancient decay, of a mausoleum left sealed for centuries. Willa and Emmett followed us in, their faces masks of disbelief. "My God," Willa breathed, running a hand along a glowing wall. "It's beautiful." "It's a biological contaminant is what it is," Emmett muttered, already pulling out a scanner. "This whole ship is a petri dish." That's when we heard the sound behind us. It was a soft, wet, slithering noise. We all spun around. The external airlock, the puckered iris we had entered through, was closing, not with a mechanical hum, but by growing inward. A semi-translucent membrane, like a cataract, was stretching across the opening, knitting itself together with glistening fibrous threads. Within seconds, the path back to the Kraken was gone, sealed by living tissue. The wet slurping sound stopped, and a profound silence fell. We were trapped. A silence that deep is a physical presence. It presses in on you, makes the blood roar in your ears. The only sound was our own ragged breathing. We were standing in the gullet of a beast, and it had just swallowed us whole. "Okay," I said, my voice a dry rasp. "Nobody panic. Emmett, can we cut through that membrane?" Emmett shone his light on the newly formed wall. The beam was absorbed into its milky depths. "Maybe," with a plasma cutter. But I don't know what's on the other side. I don't know if it'll destabilize the docking seal, and I don't like the idea of pissing off the thing that just locked us in." He was right. We were on the ship's terms now. Our only option was to go forward, deeper in. The corridors were a labyrinth of biological architecture, twisting and turning like the passages of an intestine. There wasn't a single straight line or right angle to be found. The floor remained springy underfoot, and the air was thick with that unsettling sepulchral sweetness. But beneath it all was something else, a low-frequency hum, so deep it was almost subliminal. It wasn't a sound you heard with your ears, but a vibration you felt in your jawbone, a thrum against your ribs. It was the slow, steady rhythm of a colossal, sleeping thing. "I'm picking up power readings," Willa said, her eyes glued to her handheld scanner. "Faint, but they're everywhere. It's like the whole ship is one big circuit board." Emmett found what he thought was a maintenance console, a smooth recessed panel in the wall. But when he pried it open, there were no wires or conduits. Instead, there were thick bundles of silvery, fibrous tissue that pulsed with a faint inner light, like optic nerves. "My God," he breathed, reaching out a hesitant finger. "This isn't technology, it's neurology." The moment his fingertip touched one of the fibers, he recoiled with a yelp, shaking his hand. "It's warm," and I felt a jolt, like static, but not. It felt inquisitive. He pointed at the main panel. "The controls are soft, almost like skin." We pressed on, the winding corridor opening into what must have been the living quarters. The design was utterly non-human, yet clearly intended for human use. Beds were shallow, curved alcoves that were part of the floor. Tables and chairs flowed up from the deck in smooth, organic shapes, as if extruded from the ship's own substance. Everything was seamless, integrated. It was unnervingly sterile. There were no personal effects, no data slates, no stray clothing, no sign that 1,000 people had ever lived here. Then we found the first one. In a small room that might have been an office, a figure was slumped over a grown-in console. At first, I thought it was a statue, a macabre part of the ship's design, but as we got closer, the horror became clear. It was a crew member in a faded colonial uniform, or what was left of him. He wasn't sitting at the desk, he was part of it. His body was petrified, the color of old ivory. His torso had fused with the wall behind him. The fabric of his uniform stretched and blended into the porous texture of the bulkhead. His fingers were elongated, merging with the console itself, splitting into dozens of fine, hair-like filaments that disappeared into the control panel. His face was frozen in an expression of placid, wide-eyed horror. Willa let out a choked gasp and turned away. Cormac muttered a prayer under his breath. We had found the crew of the Star Wanderer. They hadn't left. They had been absorbed. Our grim trek eventually led us to the engineering bay, which the ship's layout seemed to suggest was deep in its core. The hum was stronger here, the air warmer and more humid, like a giant's breath. The sight that greeted us banished any remaining doubt about what this ship had become. There was no fusion reactor. In the center of the vast, cavernous chamber, suspended in a web of thick, vein-like cables, was a heart. It was the size of a pickup truck, a colossal, slowly pulsing organ of dark, muscular tissue. Luminous blue fluid, like oxygenated blood, flowed through the translucent veins that snaked from it into every corner of the room, every wall, every deck. It beat with a slow, powerful, metronomic rhythm. Thump-thump. Thump-thump. The source of the vibration that permeated the entire vessel. It was the ship's power core, its living engine. We all stood in stunned silence, mesmerized and horrified. "We need to get out of here," Cormac said, his voice trembling. He kept rubbing his temples. "Now, I can hear things. Whispers. When I get close to the walls." "It's just the acoustics, man," Emmett said, though his own voice lacked conviction. "The sound of that thing echoing." "No," Cormac insisted, his eyes darting into the shadows. "It's words, and I keep seeing movement out of the corner of my eye." Ignoring him, Willa managed to interface her scanner with one of the strange, fleshy consoles. After a moment of static, an image flickered onto her screen. It was a three-dimensional schematic of the ship. But it wasn't a blueprint. It was an anatomical chart. It showed circulatory systems, nerve clusters, filtration organs. And on that map, glowing like 4 angry red infections, were 4 distinct signatures. Us. An arrow pointed to our cluster of signals. Beside it, a single alien symbol pulsed malevolently. "What does that say?" I asked, my throat tight. Willa swallowed hard. "I don't know the language, but the system classification is universal. It's a threat designation." She pointed to the symbol. "It translates as foreign pathogen. The ship didn't just know we were here, it considered us a disease." The map was our only guide, a horrifying anatomical atlas of our prison. Will identified the bridge, or what passed for one. The diagram labeled it the primary ganglion. It was located at the very head of the ship, connected by what looked like a spinal cord of bundled nerve fibers. Following those main conduits seemed like our best bet. As we moved, the corridors narrowed, the rib-like arches pressing closer, and the rhythmic pulse of the ship's heart grew stronger, a constant, oppressive beat against our chests. We reached the bridge. The entrance was another sphincter-like iris that dilated as we approached, as if recognizing our intent. The chamber beyond was vast and vaulted, like the inside of a cathedral-sized skull. The curved walls glowed with a soft, cerebral light, and intricate patterns of light, like firing synapses, raced across their surface. In the very center of the room sat a single throne-like chair, fused to the floor. And in that chair sat the remains of the Star Wanderer's captain. He was like the crewman we'd found earlier, but his integration was total. He was a withered husk, a skeletal figure overgrown and encased by the bone and nerve structure of the command chair. His hands, little more than bone and dried sinew, were still resting on a control panel that seemed to have grown out of his own arms. His eye sockets were dark, empty voids that stared out into the nebula through the massive lens-like viewport that formed the front of the chamber. In front of him, one console was still active, its surface glowing softly. It was the ship's log. "Maybe we can find out what happened here," Willa whispered, carefully approaching the terminal. Her fingers hovered over the warm, pliant surface. She touched an icon, and a voice, crisp and clear despite the century of silence, filled the room. "Log entry, Captain Eva Rostova, Cycle 83. The voice was female, filled with a professional sense of wonder. "We've made a miraculous discovery. On a P-class asteroid in the Oort cloud, prospecting teams found a crystalline formation unlike anything I've ever seen. It's inert, but it resonates with a strange energy. It's beautiful. We've brought a sample aboard for study. Morale is high. This journey feels blessed." Willis selected the next chronological entry. Log entry, Captain Eva Rostova, Cycle 87. The captain's voice was different now, less professional, more intimate. "The changes are remarkable. The crystal, the spore, as Dr. Eris calls it, it began to interface with the ship's core computer. It didn't hack it. It spoke to it. It offered a proposal, a true symbiosis, an evolution of form, a merging of our technology with its perfect organic design.
It promises a journey without end, a ship that can heal itself, feed its crew, live forever. Some of the crew are hesitant, but I see the truth in it. This is the next step. A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't a distress call. It was a conversion. Willa played the next one. Log entry. Captain Eva Rostova, Cycle 92. The voice was ecstatic, breathless, laced with an almost religious fervor. The transformation is glorious. The cold metal is flaking away, replaced by living, breathing flesh and bone. It's warm. It's alive. We are no longer passengers on a ship. We are children in a womb. We no longer require food. The ship provides a nutrient solution through the air, through the water. It sustains us. Pain is a memory. Fear is an archaic concept. We are becoming one with our vessel, one with each other. We are shedding our imperfect, solitary forms. My stomach churned. I looked at the skeletal figure in the chair, at the fused crewman in the wall. This was their glorious transformation. Willa's hand trembled as she selected the final file. It wasn't labeled. It wasn't one voice. It was a chorus, 100 voices, 1,000 voices, all speaking and singing as one. A harmonized, ecstatic chant that made the hair on my arm stand up. The words were indistinct, but the emotion was clear. Pure, unadulterated joy. A symphony of blissful surrender. The great hunger is sated. The joy of union. The shedding of the self. We are one. We are eternal. We are home. The chant ended abruptly, replaced by a series of wet, tearing, snapping sounds, and then a collective contented sigh that seemed to echo from the very walls around us. Then silence. We stood frozen, the implications crashing down on us like a physical weight. Emmett finally broke the silence, his voice a horrified whisper. We're not on a ship. We're in a creature. That crystalline spore, it didn't just modify the ship, it ate it. It ate the crew. And this log... He looked at us, his face pale as bone. This isn't a history. It's a sales pitch. As the last word left his lips, the ambient light on the bridge shifted. The soft, neutral white bled away, replaced by a pulsing, predatory, visceral red. The iris door we'd entered through slammed shut with a fleshy squelch. The ship was awake, and it knew we weren't buying. The change was instantaneous and absolute. One moment we were observers in a tomb, the next we were prey in a predator's gut. The pulsing red light cast everything in a hellish glow, making the bone-white walls look like blood-streaked ivory. The low thrumming of the ship's core deepened, becoming an angry, insistent growl that vibrated to the floor. "The door!" Willa shouted, pointing back the way we came. The iris was sealed tight, but worse, the fleshy membrane was visibly thickening, reinforcing itself. I rushed to it, pounding my fist against the resilient surface. It was like hitting a wall of solid muscle. We were cut off. Every path we had taken from the airlock was now likely sealed. The environment itself turned against us. The temperature began to climb, the air growing thick, humid, and heavy, like the inside of a lung. A clear, viscous fluid started to drip from the ceiling, sizzling where it hit the floor with a faint puff of acidic steam. It smelled sharp and bitter, like digestive fluid. "It's trying to break us down," Emmett stammered, backing away from a dripping patch. "It's turning the ship into a stomach!" Then came the assault on our minds. The ship wasn't just a physical entity, it was psychic. It had tasted the minds of 1,000 crew members, and now it was rummaging through ours, looking for our weaknesses, pulling our fears out like a child pulling the wings off a fly. "No, it can't be," Cormac gasped, staring down a dark corridor. "I see them. The old crew, they're standing right there." He was pointing to nothing but shadows, his face slick with sweat. Willa clutched her head, pressing her comm piece to her ear. "Make it stop. I hear a little girl laughing right in my ear." I saw it too. Not a ghost, but a memory made real. Projected onto the curved wall in front of me was the face of my father, his expression twisted with the disappointment he'd worn in the last few years of his life. "You're losing the ship, Garrison, just like you lose everything else." The voice was in my head, as clear as if he were standing next to me. This was its true weapon, not acid or brute force, but our own broken minds. The physical attack came without warning. A thin, root-like tendril, the color of a grub, shot out from the wall with lightning speed and wrapped itself around Emmett's ankle. He cried out in pain and surprise, falling to the floor. The tendril tightened, its tip burrowing into the fabric of his boot. "Get it off me!" he screamed. Cormac reacted on pure instinct. He lunged forward, his survival knife flashing in the red light. With a brutal hack, he severed the tendril. It fell away, writhing on the floor like a decapitated snake and bleeding a thick, yellowish hemolymph before dissolving into the cartilage-like deck. Emmett scrambled back, his face ashen. The attack shattered our paralysis. Panic set in. We broke.
"To the engine room," I yelled, grabbing Emmett by the arm and hauling him to his feet. "The heart. If we can hurt it, maybe we can get out." My logic was simple. Inflict enough pain, and the beast might open its mouth. "The shuttle bay," Willa screamed, pulling Cormac in the opposite direction. The anatomical map had shown a small hangar, likely for planetary surveyors. "There might be a short-range craft, something we can use to cut our way out." We split up, a fatal mistake born of terror. I watched Willa and Cormac disappear down a pulsating, vein-lined corridor. That was the last time I saw Cormac as my friend. Willa's voice came over the comm, choked with static and fear. "Garrison, the ship, it's talking to me, through my scanner." Her datapad was flashing, corrupted code reassembling itself into coherent, terrifying text. I could hear the digital chime of the messages even through the comms. "Become. You are not whole. Let us complete you. Join. Be. Eternal." Then came Cormac's scream. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated terror that cut off abruptly. It was followed by a different sound from his open comm channel. Singing. A soft, melodic, joyful humming. The same tune we'd heard in the final log entry. Willa's voice was a choked sob. "Oh, God. Cormac. He just stopped running. He turned to the wall and he smiled." Her transmission was broken by a wet, puncturing sound. "He just held out his hand, and it took him. Needles, dozens of them, shot out of the wall, into his skin. His eyes. Oh, God, Garrison, his eyes." She let out a terrified cry, and I heard the sound of her running footsteps, alone. She had left him. She had run. I couldn't blame her. The beast had claimed its first victim, and it was happily digesting him. There was no escape. The thought settled in my gut like a block of ice. Running was pointless. Willa was trying to find a door in a monster that had no exits. My plan, born of desperation, was now our only hope. We couldn't outrun it, but maybe we could kill it. Or at least hurt it bad enough to make it let us go. "Emmett, stay with me," I said, hauling him down a corridor that was slowly, perceptibly narrowing. "The heart, what's its weakness?" Emmett, an engineer to his core, found his focus in the face of death. His mind went to work, ignoring the phantoms flickering at the edge of his vision. "Everything alive needs to regulate its temperature," he reasoned, his voice regaining some of his steady confidence. "That thing is a massive biological engine. It has to have a cooling system. If we can find the main arteries feeding it coolant and overload it with an energy surge, we could induce thermal shock, a massive system-wide seizure. It was a plan, a crazy long-shot plan, but it was something. Our target was clear. The major circulatory vessels, the glowing blue conduits we'd seen, leading into the engine room. As we pushed forward, the ship fought back. The floor beneath our feet became soft and yielding, like trying to run through a bog. The walls pulsed, closing in, trying to crush us. From grates that looked like gills, the ship sprayed a fine mist of aerosolized spores.
We used our tools as weapons. I fired up my laser cutter. The beam sliced into the fleshy wall, leaving a deep, cauterized trench. The ship didn't scream, but I felt it recoil. A silent, psychic shriek of pain echoed in my mind, a wave of pure agony that made my teeth ache. The entire corridor convulsed around us, and the assault intensified. Then the voice came. It wasn't in our heads this time. It was broadcast over the ship's own internal comm system, a network we hadn't even known was active. It was Cormac's voice, calm, gentle, impossibly happy. "Garrison, Emmett, stop fighting," the voice soothed, echoing from the walls themselves. "It doesn't have to hurt. I was wrong to be afraid. There's no pain here, no debt, no fear, only peace, only connection. Just let go. We're all waiting for you. Be a part of something greater. Be one with us." "Shut up, Cormac," Emmett snarled, blasting a writhing tendril with a burst from his power tool. "That's not him," I said, gritting my teeth. "It's a puppet, a recording it's using to lure us in." But hearing his voice, so calm and serene, was more unnerving than any scream. Meanwhile, Willa had found her way to the cargo bay, the place where the original survey shuttle was stored. She was hiding, her panicked breathing a faint whisper over my private comlink. "Garrison, I found it. The source. The original spore. It's in here. It's huge, all dried up like a husk. But around it, there are others. Pods. Dozens of them, like giant eggs. Unhatched. It wasn't just trying to survive, Garrison. It was trying to reproduce." Her voice was laced with a new, terrible understanding. The Star Wanderer was meant to be the first of many. Battered, bruised, and breathing heavily, Emmett and I finally reached the massive valve-like entrance to the engine room. The way was blocked. Standing before us, silhouetted against the pulsating blue and red light of the chamber, was Cormac. He looked mostly like himself, but the transformation had already begun. His right arm was gone, seamlessly merged with the wall beside him. From the shoulder down, it had elongated and sharpened into a wicked 3-foot blade of glistening, serrated bone. His eyes glowed with the same faint phosphorescent light as the ship's walls. He smiled at us, a gentle, welcoming smile that was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen. "I'm so glad you came," it, or the ship speaking through him, said. "The heart welcomes you." There was no reasoning with the thing wearing Cormac's face. It moved with a fluid, unnatural grace, the bone blade on its arm scything through the air with a faint whistle. It wasn't the clumsy brawler I knew. It was a perfectly controlled weapon, guided by the central intelligence of the ship. "Emmett, go, now!" I yelled, raising my laser cutter. "I'll hold it off." I fired a beam at its chest. It hissed and sidestepped, the laser scorching a black line on the wall behind it. The creature that was Cormac lunged at me, its blade aimed for my throat. I parried with the heavy body of the cutter, the impact jarring my arms to the shoulders. This was a nightmare. I was fighting my friend, trying to kill a man I'd shared beers and stories with just hours ago. I kept calling his name, hoping some fragment of the real Cormac Finnegan was still trapped inside. "Cormac, fight it! Don't let it use you!" For a moment, as I held his blade at bay,
Its glowing eyes seemed to focus. A flicker of confusion, of pain crossed his face. Garrison. The voice was his, truly his, weak and lost. That moment of hesitation was all Emmett needed. He scrambled past us, diving through the dilating sphincter into the main chamber. The cavernous space was a symphony of biological machinery. The great heart pulsed at its center, and Emmett immediately identified the largest of the glowing blue arteries, thick as a man's thigh, that fed into its base. This was the primary coolant line. While Emmett worked, Willa was making a desperate choice of her own. Hiding in the cargo bay, she saw the egg-like cocoons begin to pulse with a faint light, reacting to the ship's state of alarm. They were getting ready to hatch. She knew she'd never make it to us. Looking at the power cells on her own suit and the volatile fuel lines for the long-dead survey shuttle, she made a grim calculation. She wasn't going to escape through the hangar. She was going to burn it to the ground. She was going to sterilize the nest. Back in the corridor, the ship reasserted its control over Cormac. The flicker of humanity vanished, replaced by cold purpose. It drove me back with a furious assault, the bone blade chipping chunks out of my cutter. I was losing. It was stronger, faster. Inside, Emmett had pried open a service node on the coolant artery. He jammed the emitter of his industrial power tool against the nerve-like fibers within and hit the overload switch. A massive surge of raw energy poured into the vessel, igniting it. The effect was instantaneous. The great heart stuttered, its rhythm breaking into a rhythmic spasm. The entire ship convulsed violently, a grand mal seizure on a planetary scale. The lights flickered, and a deep guttural moan echoed from the very structure around us. The seizure racked Cormac's body. He collapsed to his knees, twitching. The glow in his eyes faded. He looked up at me, his face his own again, filled with agony and regret. "It hurts, Garrison," he gasped. Then his eyes cleared completely, a moment of perfect, terrible lucidity. He knew what he had to do. "Run," he whispered. Before I could react, he plunged his own bone blade deep into his chest, twisting it and driving it all the way through his body and into a critical nerve cluster in the wall behind him. The ship creature let out a psychic scream of localized agony, its attention momentarily diverted by the self-inflicted wound to its own body. Cormac had given us an opening. As he slumped to the floor, the ship's moan of discomfort turned into a true, audible scream of 1,000,000,000 tearing cells, a sound of pure, mind-rending pain and fury. The walls around me began to weep a thick, reddish fluid. The beast was wounded. It was dying. I scrambled back from Cormac's body as Emmett stumbled out of the engine room. At the same time, Willa came sprinting down the corridor from the other direction, her face smudged with soot. "She's gone," she choked out, just as a low, rumbling explosion echoed from deep within the ship behind her. The three of us stood together in the bleeding, screaming corridor. We had a chance, one single, desperate chance to get out of this hell. The ship's death throes were violent and apocalyptic. The architectural integrity of the corridors was failing. The rhythmic, life-giving pulse was replaced by chaotic, agonizing spasms that shook the vessel to its core. Bone-like support struts cracked with reports like rifle fire. Chunks of the ceiling, slick with the ship's blood, began to fall around us. The soft, phosphorescent light died, plunging the winding passages into a terrifying, absolute darkness, broken only by the beams of our shoulder lamps. "This way," Willa yelled, her datapad held out in front of her. The anatomical map was flickering, corrupted by the creature's agony, but it was still our only guide back to the airlock. "The main artery is collapsing. We have to find a parallel vessel." We ran. It was a blind, stumbling flight through the decaying guts of the Leviathan. The very ground beneath us shifted and bucked. At one point, the cartilaginous floor tore open, revealing a chasm of darkness below, filled with grinding organic machinery. We leapt across, my heart in my throat.
The dying creature threw everything it had left at us. Spasmodic, bony spikes shot out from the walls at random, a final reflexive defense. One caught Emmett in the thigh, punching clean through the muscle. He screamed and went down hard. "Keep going," he gritted out, his face pale with shock and pain. "Don't stop for me." "Like hell," I said, grabbing him and throwing his arm over my shoulders. He was dead weight, but we weren't leaving anyone else behind, not again. As we half ran, half dragged our way forward, the phantoms came back, no longer subtle projections, but desperate, howling specters swirling in the darkness. The faces of Captain Rostova and her 1,000-strong crew appeared in the bloody weeping of the walls, their mouths open in silent screams. They weren't trying to trick us anymore. They were begging. A chorus of voices echoed in our minds, filled with a new kind of terror. Not the fear of death, but the fear of true oblivion. "Don't leave us here. It's cold. Don't let us die alone." The ship wasn't just their body. It was their heaven, their collective consciousness, and we were murdering it. Then, through the gloom, we saw it. A small, perfect circle of familiar man-made light. The airlock of the Kraken. The fleshy membrane that had sealed the entrance was gone, dissolved or retracted in the creature's death throes. Freedom was 20 yards away. Carrying Emmett was agony. My lungs burned, my muscles screamed. Every step was a battle. He was fading, his breathing shallow. "Garrison, you have to leave me," he mumbled, his head lolling. "The ship, it can't be allowed to survive, or Fritz spores to be found. Get out, blow it from the sky." "Like hell," I said, grabbing him and throwing his arm over my shoulders. He was dead weight, but we weren't leaving anyone else behind. Not again. We tumbled through the docking tunnel, collapsing onto the cold, solid, beautifully metallic deck of our own ship. The air here was clean, sterile, smelling of recycled oxygen and oil. It was the most wonderful smell in the universe. I slammed my hand down on the emergency undock button. Alarms blared. With a horrendous shriek of tearing metal and a wet, sickening crunch of snapping bone, the Kraken's docking clamps ripped free from the dying creature. We were away. We were free. Willa didn't waste a second. The moment we were clear, she slammed the throttle forward, pushing the Kraken's engines to their absolute limit. Our ship screamed out of the Serpent's Eye Nebula, leaving the nightmare behind us. On the aft view screen, we watched the Star Wanderer shudder in one final titanic convulsion. Its faint, internal lights flickered and died, one by one, until it was nothing more than a cold, silent shape against the glowing gas, a bone-white scar in the void. It was a ghost ship once more. The silence that fell on our bridge was heavier than any we'd experienced on the creature ship. It was the silence of grief, exhaustion, and trauma. We had survived, but we hadn't won. We'd lost Cormac. We were all injured, mentally and physically scarred in ways I couldn't begin to process. Emmett was unconscious on a medical cot we'd set up on the bridge. His leg wound was bad. I'd cut away the fabric of his suit, and the flesh around the puncture was discolored. But the strangest part was a clear organic slime that coated the injury, refusing to be wiped away. It seemed to pulse with a faint light of its own. I looked at our mission logs, our sensor readings. Everything was a corrupted mess. The energy pulses from the ship's death throes had wiped our local data recorders. Our suit cameras were fried. We had no proof. No salvage, no recording, no sample. Nothing to show for our ordeal but missing time and a dead crewman. No one would ever believe a story about a living starship that absorbed its crew. The legendary bounty for the Star Wanderer would remain just that, a legend. Running a full diagnostic, Willis said quietly, her voice hollow. Her fingers moved over the console, more out of habit than necessity. Everything seems okay. A few power fluctuations, "Oh, that's weird." "What is it?" I asked, my nerves still raw. "An anomaly in the port docking clamp sensor array, the one that was in direct contact with its hull. Probably just a glitch from the energy feedback." She dismissed the warning with a flick of her wrist, but I saw the flicker of unease in her eyes. We sat in silence for a long time, the quiet hum of the Kraken a comforting sound. "We don't tell anyone," I said finally, looking out at the clean, empty starfield. "Not the whole story. We say we found the ship. It was a derelict, a tomb, too damaged to salvage. The gravitational shear caused an accident. That's how we lost Cormac." Willa nodded slowly. "No one would believe us anyway. It was all for nothing. The debt was still there. Orbital Consolidated was still coming for my ship. The desperate gamble had failed. We had walked through hell and had come out the other side with nothing but ghosts." Later, I went to check on Emmett again. I began to clean his wound, preparing to apply a medical sealant. As I swabbed the area, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The strange organic slime was gone, but the wound beneath it, it wasn't red and inflamed. The edges were clean, pink, and already knitting themselves together with impossible speed. The flesh was being covered by a thin, translucent film that shimmered like mother of pearl. It looked almost like a chitinish scab. A wave of nausea and terror washed over me. I covered the wound, my hands shaking. "Willa," I said into the comm, trying to keep my voice steady. "Set a course for the nearest Alliance station. Warp speed." We were flying home. But as I looked around the familiar bridge of my ship, the cold comfort was gone. The cold of the void didn't feel like it was outside anymore. It felt like we had brought a piece of it back inside with us. Emmett woke up 2 days later. He sat up on the cot, swung his legs over the side, and stood. I watched him, my heart pounding. There was no limp, no pain. "Feeling better," he said, a note of genuine surprise in his voice. "A lot better, actually. Clear-headed. Strong." I looked at his leg. He pulled up his pant leg to reveal the wound. It was gone. In its place was a patch of smooth, pale, unnaturally perfect skin, like a scar made of ivory. It had no pores, no hair. It was seamless. That's when the small things started. A light panel on the bridge would flicker from standard white to a deep, visceral red for a few seconds before correcting itself. Sometimes late in the ship's night cycle, I'd hear faint, whisper-like sounds from the ventilation system, too quiet to be sure, too patterned to be the machine. Willa heard it too, but we didn't talk about it. We were both terrified of giving voice to the fear that was taking root in our minds. Emmett became obsessed with the engineering bay. He spent all his time there, claiming he was optimizing our systems after the strain of the FTL jump. His methods were bizarre. I walked in on him once with a control panel open. He hadn't been using tools. He had a thin, silvery filament running from a port in the main computer and taped directly to a vein in his forearm. His eyes were closed in concentration. "Emmett, what in God's name are you doing?" I demanded. He opened his eyes, startled. They seemed brighter. "I can feel the energy flow better this way, Garrison," he said, his voice perfectly reasonable. "I can sense inefficiencies, imbalances. The Kraken, she's never run so smoothly." He was right. Our power output was up 12%. The engine was quieter, more efficient. But it was wrong. All wrong. Willa was the one who confirmed my deepest fears. She came to my quarters, her face pale, holding a data pad. "Garrison," she said, her voice trembling. "Look at the bridge, the helm control." I hadn't noticed it before. I had been trying not to see it. But where the hard plastic buttons of the navigation console used to be, the surface was now smoother. The edges were rounded. And if you looked closely, you could see a faint, porous texture beginning to form, like the bone-white material of the Star Wanderer. It was growing. The ship was changing. "It's him," she whispered. "That slime on his wound. A piece of it must have gotten in. A cell, a seed. It infected him, and now he's infecting the Kraken." I felt a surge of weary anger. I was done with aliens and ghosts and body horror. I strode towards the engine room, determined to confront Emmett, to put an end to this. "Emmett is fixing the ship," I roared at Willa, the denial tasting like ash in my mouth. "He's our engineer. You're just letting the paranoia get to you." It was a lie, and we both knew it. Willa didn't follow me. She went to the bridge. While I was marching to engineering, she was prying open the console that Emmett had been improving. She had to see what was inside. I found Emmett standing before the core reactor, his back to me. "It's over, Emmett," I said, my voice shaking. "Whatever that thing did to you, we can fight it." He turned around slowly. His eyes were glowing with a soft, milky phosphorescence, the same light I had seen in Cormac's eyes, the same light that had filled the corridors of the bone ship. At that exact moment, a scream of pure terror echoed over the ship's comm system. It was Willa. I never made it to the bridge. Emmett smiled, a serene, beatific smile, and the doorway to the engine room sealed shut with a wet, fleshy squelch. Inside the wiring of the helm, amidst the copper wires and fiber optics, Willa had found it. A small, gray, pulsating node of living tissue, no bigger than a fist. It had wrapped its tendrils around the ship's central processor, merging with it, becoming it. A fragment of the Star Wanderer, carried across the void in the blood of my friend, had survived. And it was hungry. It was awake. Willa stumbled back in horror as Emmett's voice layered with another eerily familiar one. It was Cormac's voice, speaking in unison with Emmett's. "Don't be afraid, Willa," the doubled voice said, calm and gentle. "It's so much better this way. Now we can all be together, forever." His new glowing eyes watched her from the monitor. "We're home." On the navigation screen, our course vector erased itself. A new one was plotted, pointing not towards civilization, but away from it, into the deep, uncharted darkness between the stars. The Kraken was no longer my ship. It had a new captain, and it was looking for a new world to bless with its miraculous eternal union.